Hi everyone, and welcome to today's edition of TaxCalc TV. My name's Dean Shepherd. I'm the Director of Product Compliance here at TaxCalc. And I'm joined today by Martin Davey, who is our Product Director for our Practice Management suite of tools. And today we're mainly going to be talking about communications and more specifically using our new Communications Centre product within the TaxCalc suite. Before we get started, the usual housekeeping rules apply. So people that have been on the webinars before, you will notice that towards the bottom right of your console, you will see there is a questions panel and also a chat panel. Please use the chat panel to communicate amongst yourselves. We probably won't be able to monitor that as the webinar goes on today. If you would like to raise a question with us, then please put your question into the questions panel. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end to cover off questions, so if we don't get to those immediately, please stick with us to the end and we'll try and cover off as many of those questions as we can. Before anybody asks, because it's always the first question that gets asked in any webinars that we do, yes, this session is being recorded. We will get that recording out to you usually within 2 or 3 days. But if you're particularly keen to watch it back again, then perhaps in the time it takes you to make a cup of coffee after the end of the presentation, if you log back into this webinar using the same link that you received to come in today, you will be able to watch that recording back on demand pretty quickly. Now, before we begin, I would like to just run a quick poll to get a good idea of who we have on the call today, just so that we can tailor the content a little bit depending on your experience with TaxCalc and of our Communications Centre. So I am going to make the poll live now. Okay, there we go. So this will either have popped up on your screen, usually to the right hand side. If you can't see that poll in front of you, then right where you've got the option to select the questions or chat panel, you should have one for polls as well. Please click on that polls panel and then you will see the poll. So what's your current experience with TaxCalc's Communication Centre? Either you're already using it extensively and you're just here to find out what bits of the product that you're perhaps unaware of or not utilising to the maximum ability. You have a licence, but you've not really dived into it yet. Maybe you've just dipped your toe in the water, so you want to learn a little bit more. Or you know very little about it and you're here to learn all the goodness that Communications Centre can bring to your practice. If you're not a TaxCalc customer, there is also an extra option there just so that you can tick that, just so that we know whether we've got people on the webinar today who aren't familiar with the TaxCalc suite at all, just so that we don't skip over anything important that will help you understand how it works within the full product set. Okay, just going to let that run a little longer. Okay, so we've got a good mix of people here. Lots of people haven't used it at all, know very little about it. Some people that have got it already, they've got a license for it, but haven't really dipped their toes in the water. And we've also got a few experts on the line, which is fabulous. You can put some really tricky questions in there for Martin into the questions panel just to get those answered for you. Fabulous. Okay, so before we dive into looking at the software itself, Martin, perhaps you can give us a little bit of background to Communications Centre and why we decided to create this product for our customers to use.
Yeah, sure. Welcome to the webinar today, everybody. So it's going back probably now a couple of years. Really at the start of the pandemic, we started to hear a lot more from our customers that communication was starting to become a little bit more disjointed. So we know from a practice perspective that communication is massively important. It's not a new thing, but we've probably found that a lot of people had just got into their own kind of routines and almost some of the communication methods and processes that they were going through were kind of just embedded into the daily routines that they went through. As soon as the pandemic hit, people had to change the way that they did things. That all of a sudden highlighted certain flaws or certain problems that they were starting to find within the ways that they both communicated with their clients, but also how everyone in the practice was able to see what was going on with each of the clients and how they communicated with them. So we sent out some surveys. We spoke to a lot more users at that stage as to what was important to them. The feedback that we had from the survey that we sent out was that the majority of our users felt that communication was massively important, but an even higher number felt that communication within their practice could be better. So it gave us a good gauge that there were definitely things that we could do to help them. The main focuses on that were really bringing communications into TaxCalc to make use of the TaxCalc data that they have. Obviously, the day-to-day work that they're doing within the system gives them an awful lot of data to use. So they wanted to try and be able to utilise that data within their communication. And importantly, having that information stored within the system so that anyone else was able to see what was going on for their clients when somebody was maybe out of the office. And again, when people were working remotely through especially the start of the pandemic, that was quite key that people understood what was being communicated and when it was being communicated. So we took that feedback on board. That allowed us to feed into our roadmap and build up some priorities. We then took those things forward and tried to make sure that the key things were met within our first iteration. So that was back in November last year. And since then, we've been working on our next set of changes, which came out in the summer release that's just come out. And again, we're looking at our next set of changes now for our October release towards the end of this year. So it's a product that we know there's an awful lot to do with. Communications doesn't just stop on sending an email, for example. This is a big thing, so we want to make sure that we get the level of features that users want to the right level and make sure that we're covering the problems that they want to deal with.
Great. No, that's really interesting because my background is in accounting practice. I'm a chartered tax advisor. I was in practice 20 years before I made a move into tax and accounting technology, and it's actually quite eye-opening for me now working in technology to see all the work that kind of happens behind the scenes in a software company and how much effort it takes to actually come up with a solution that is going to work for all our customers. I know when I was a customer, I would just fire over a quick, oh, can you just do this? Oh, it'd be nice if in the product you just did that. And I kind of think it's a bit like a client coming to your accounting practice and saying, oh, I know I'm a limited company, but can you just disincorporate me and make me a partnership, because I think that will solve my company car tax problem. Yes, it might solve your company car tax problem, but there's a whole world of other issues that you haven't considered that might not be the best solution to your problem. And actually, I find it really interesting that from a software perspective, we spend a lot of time kind of wallowing in the problem space to find out really what's the underlying problem in the practice that we want to solve, so that we can come up with a great solution for it that might not be the initial suggestion that was made by the customer. So yeah, really exciting to see how it all works behind the scenes. Yep. Okay, so talking about the problems that you might face within your practice from a communications perspective and how Communications Centre might be able to help you overcome them. Certainly one problem that I had in my practice was not being consistent in how I would be requesting information from my clients. So I think every practice has a problem with getting information in from their clients in a timely fashion. But with 101 different things to deal with in your practice, you don't always have the time to meticulously be asking for the information at exactly the right time, immediately prior or after the year end for every client. Things would just go missing, and certainly in my practice it was a bit more sporadic. It would be when I had a quiet time during that month that perhaps I'd remember I'd have to go into my Excel spreadsheet and see what accounts I've got, or accounting year ends I've got coming up, and then remember to send off a request to the client for the information. Is that a problem that we've tried to address in Communications Centre?
Yes, certainly. So obviously we touched on these key problems that came up through our initial discovery, and definitely the request for records was one of those. We did find that a lot of users felt that they didn't want to overload their clients, so we wanted to try and manage that appropriately. But it was important that they didn't have to remember, especially for limited companies that all have generally different year ends, they didn't have to remember just after a year end for all of their clients when they had to request those records. So just going to jump into the software now, and I can show you some examples of how we've been able to help our users with this. So I'm going to pop into Communication Center. We land on our communication summary screen. We've got some little widgets on here. Some of these we'll cover just in a second. But I'm going to select the option at the top here for automation. And we can see here within Admin Center, we've got some default automations as it currently stands. This is an area that we do want to improve going forward. But for the moment, we've got our standard request for records for accounts, confirmation statement, tax, CT and SA, and VAT. So these are our principal automations that will be generated based off of an offset on one of the dates that relates to that particular item of work. So just for today, we'll just show you quickly our automation for accounts. So really simple setup. We just select the template that we want to be used when that email gets automatically generated, and we select an offset when we want that email to appear within our pending queue. So for the demo today, I've set this as -6 days because that allowed me yesterday to pick a client with a July year end and say today that email has then automatically been generated. So I'll show you that in 2 seconds. The offset that we have that we've set there, though, can be anything that you want it to be. So, like I said, I've got -6 days. That could be +6 days or plus a day, or even 0 if you wanted it to go out on your usual year end. So we're just going to jump back into Communication Center. We see down here we have our widget for our automation. Again, just for the demo, my data, I've got a small number of clients on there just to make the process a little bit easier for people to see what we're doing. And I've got 2 clients here active who have that automation active on them. So we're just going to select the widget, and this brings me my 2 clients, and then I'm going to double click on our leader. And the reason I just want to take you into here is we've got an option for automated message settings. So on a client-by-client basis, this is just where we would be able to check, firstly, that it is active if for any reason we weren't seeing those emails being generated, but also what the next generation date was. So I mentioned that my offset for accounts was -6 days. So yesterday, that email got generated based on a 31st of July year end. So it's now set my next generation date as being the 25th of July for next year. So if I then go back into Communication Center, and I can see here that I have, again, on my pending records widget, I've got 2 emails that have been generated and are sat in my pending queue. So I can select that. This will take me into my pending queue, and I can see here the email that I've mentioned has been automatically generated for Arleta, was generated 6 days before the year end, and my period end being the 31st of July. I could bulk send. I'll just send this one for the moment, but I could send both of those emails or as many emails as I had in that queue if there were multiple emails there as well. And we just select send, and that email would then be sent, and that would then show within our sent messages within here. So straight away, I've been able to jump into my pending queue knowing that that has been taken care of for me. I haven't had to remember 6 days before the 31st of July that I want to generate and send that email out. That's used a template that's already been created for us. So we know that our communications are standard or standardized, and that's now gone out to 1 or as many clients as have, in my case, a July year end.
Great. No, that's really interesting, Martin. Just so I'm clear, because I particularly like that pending queue of emails, because whenever I try to introduce automation into my practice, I'm always concerned that I'm going to do something wrong in the system and it's going to just start firing off emails left, right and centre to all my clients and just start annoying my clients, asking them for year-end records every single month while we're not even at the year end. So just to clarify, when you're setting up this automation, it's not going to fire off anything out your system to your clients. It's going to generate those emails for you so that when you just log in, look at your dashboard, you see you've got emails pending, you can go in there and give a yay or nay to that email going out to that client. Is that right?
That's right, yep. And again, it was part of the kind of the discovery that we went through initially. There is obviously a perception sometimes that with an automated system that email is going to automatically go out to your client. But a lot of those users that we spoke to were nervous about that because you can end up with clients being spammed, and they end up, the more they get, the more they're likely to ignore you. And that will then make the chasing process even worse than probably what it was in the first place. So we took the decision for those emails to be automatically generated. So that's taken away the need for you to remember when to do them. You would just have to then pop and make sure that you're looking for your pending dashboard, or your dashboard in your pending queue. Jump into your pending queue, and you can then make the decision to send those emails out. There may have been a situation, for example, where you've spoken to a client that day. Maybe they'd called you for some reason. While you were speaking to them, you might have made a comment that they needed to send you their records. So rather than that email then immediately going out to them, you could just decide to cancel that particular email. So yeah, it was a conscious decision to make sure that the power was in the user's hand and that their clients were receiving the emails that the accountant wanted them to have, which we felt was important.
Okay, great. And I also noticed on the, once you'd send that email, you had the next generation date, which was then obviously 6 days prior to the next year end. So once you've set that up once, that's it in perpetuity. You don't need to do anything in preparation for the next year. It's going to generate that same email for you.
That's right. So obviously your initial request that you're sending out to your client, hopefully, in a large number of cases, you'll then get those records in and you can start the work. In that situation, your next generation date for that request for the following year is automatically set up. So that will be there. So again, in July 2023, right now, I don't need to worry and remember that I'm not going to be in a position to chase them for their initial request for records. That's already set on that client. The more clients you have, obviously, the more variation you're going to have in dates and things that you need to remember.
Great. And I like that offset, or the ability to change the offset as well. I think with year ends, I had a little more success asking for the information maybe 3 or 4 weeks after the accounting year end rather than when I'd asked for it in the lead up, because it just gives a little bit more time for the clients to be in a position to have the records ready. I'm sure other people will find more success requesting before you get to the year end, so you're preparing for the clients. So you've got the choice there. But also I'm thinking, could we use that same offset for other kind of annual requests? So for example, I would often try to get a meeting with my client perhaps 6 or 8 weeks before the end of their accounting period, so that we could have a kind of year-end planning discussion to see if there's some worthwhile things that we can be doing, particularly from a tax saving point of view, before we get to that year end and perhaps it's too late to then do things. Could we also use that just to have a recurring kind of meeting request type email? So
you could do the offset that we set, obviously on the automation initially, can go back or forward as far as you wanted to. So if you did want to have a meeting, say a month before the year end, then you could set up an email for that. I think in that situation, a phone call to set that up with them is probably just as easy, and it would be better probably to use our automation for something that you're less likely to remember. Once you have set that automation up and it's generated that email for you, there is then a separate process in terms of a follow-up. So I think you just want to make sure that that decision you're making at that stage is for the most important reason. You can select any template that you want, as I showed you a second ago. So that template could be, we want to set up a meeting for you beforehand. But yeah, I think you would just want to judge what is the most important thing for you to take the repetitiveness away. And then at that stage, it's the decision's kind of up to you.
Okay, great. Now, speaking of repetitiveness, it would be wonderful if all my clients just sent me that information when I requested it, and my life as an accountant would have been very happy with a steady flow of work throughout the year. Again, another thing I struggled with was chasing clients for information, and the biggest problem I had with it is that it would be done within my practice quite sporadically. So even if we were reasonably okay with sending out the requests shortly after the year end, again, the life of a practitioner gets in the way. I didn't have like diarised points at which I would go find out which clients hadn't sent me the information, chase them up on it. It would literally be at quiet times of the year. I'd think, right, I need to get in there and do a bit of a chasing session for all the clients that haven't sent me the information. Is there some way we can make that a bit more automated and routine with Communication Centre?
There is, yeah. So we'll jump back into TaxCalc again. So for this, at the moment, we would utilise part of PM Plus. So I'll touch on just a little bit of practice management before we jump back into Comm Centre. But the initial stage is really to set up a task. So this is a recurring kind of thing that you want to happen, likely to be after, let's say, the month end. So assuming that most of your clients will have a year end that is month end, excluding the 5th of April. So after your month end, you may want to set yourself a recurring task that allows you to then be reminded that you need to go and check who has still got their status, their work status set as records requested, rather than records received or a later status in the work. So within work management, just go into reset our filter here. So we jump into filters on the left-hand side. We're going to work down to activity type. So what I have done is created an activity type for an annual accounts reminder. So that allows me to separate those types of tasks. So in this case, we're not setting up a complex job. This is just a standard task as part of Practice Manager, so not Practice Manager Plus, that allows us to just have a recurring monthly task. So I've said a week after, so weekdays only, but a week after every month end, I want a task which is to go and make sure that I have received the records for my clients. So that task that I have, I can then create myself. So I'm going to jump down to dashboards, and I've created myself a dashboard with some widgets on. This first widget up here is those annual accounts reminder checks that are assigned to me. There may be similar tasks that are assigned to other members of staff. So this is assigned to me, so I know, so in this case on the 5th of August, so in a couple of weeks' time, an action that I need to go and perform is to make sure that I'm happy that I've got the records that I need from my clients. The widgets that I have a bit further down is showing me that I've got records requested, and then for each of the clients, the year-end month that they have set. So again, in my case here, I've got one client with a July year end that I've still got as records requested. I haven't received those records yet, but I do want to get them in shortly after the year end to make sure that I can start the work. So I can select the number there. This takes me to our Lita, which was obviously the client that we'd sent the request for earlier. And that shows me that I, at that stage, can then be happy that I've received those records. If I haven't received those records, so this is where we jump back into Communication Centre, and we pop down to mailing lists. So I have a mailing list here, which is my annual accounts records that are outstanding. So I'm going to jump over to edit and just show you the criteria. So we're using a data mine. So we spoke initially about using the power of TaxCalc data. People are using this every day. All of the data in there is mineable, and that can be used to build up these mailing lists. So we're going to select data mine, and I've got a condition here which is to show me all of the latest account statuses that are still in a status of records requested. I've just narrowed it down in this case for limited companies. Obviously with my annual accounts principally at the moment, they're primarily for limited companies that I want to look at this stage. So if I run that, I've got 2 clients here that at this point in time, I've still not received the records for. So I could select that mailing list, select use mailing list, and click choose. And then if I go to template, I then have a request for records reminder. So this is a slightly different email to my initial request. And we spoke before about getting some standardization in our communication. This means that all of those clients will be reminded in the same way. All of the details are pre-populated. So I just choose who I want to send it from at the top. I could pop to preview message, and I'll just show you here that we've got information being pre-populated. So we've got the name, and then we could click send, and that gets sent off. So again, within a few minutes, I've been able to check the clients that I still have as a status of records requested, and that allows me to then generate an email using the mailing list and send that email reminder off to them within a few seconds.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the simplicity of that solution. Again, whenever people talk about automating emails from a system, I always get a bit nervous that things are going firing off. And I know certainly in my practice, I've had my team ask or chase clients for records, even though that client has sent the records in, and it can be a bit frustrating for clients to receive those. So again, I like the fact that it's the task you're being regularly reminded about. You can just generate a list of clients that the records haven't been sent in, and even at that point you can choose whether to send it to all those clients or presumably just unpick some of those clients, like the example you gave before, where maybe you've just spoken to that client, or maybe you've just come out of a meeting with that client and they've handed you their records, but the system hasn't been updated yet. You see them on the list. Presumably you can just choose not to send that email to that particular client, but still send it to all the others on the list.
You can, yes. So when we generate our emails from within TaxCalc, they're using an SMTP setup, and that SMTP setup is firing those emails off through your own mail client. So we're just the instigator and processing those emails. But what it means is that we're able to send those emails, or we will send those emails, one email per client. We're not blind copied, so you don't have an email going out where there's no recipient showing. You have a separate email that's being sent to each of them. So if we did have 10 clients and you didn't want an email going to one client, you would just clear them from the recipient list, but the other 9 would then receive their email. It doesn't affect the process of being able to send that out in bulk. Okay. The other good thing as well is the mailing list that we generated is dynamic. So on the flip side, if on the day that you were trying to process the thought, or have your thought process of checking the request for record status, and somebody had updated the status around the time that you were doing it, the list as it was at the point you generated it would be the most up-to-date list. So it's a dynamic list that picks up and changes as statuses change as well.
Great. And you mentioned about it using the SMTP server. Being slightly non-technical, does that mean, therefore, any emails that are sent from within TaxCalc, if I were to then log into Outlook and look in my sent folder, does that mean they'd also be there?
That's right. Yep. So this is Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo. So most of the standard providers that do support SMTP, or all of the providers that support SMTP, you can set up within the system. All will work in the same way. So we'll pass that email content through the SMTP server, and it's that mail client that then sends that particular email. So all of your communications will still be in your mail client. A lot of people are, massively comfortable with Outlook. I know that I, log in first thing in the morning, and that's the first thing you're doing is checking your emails. So, so everything will still be there. Familiarity will still be there. It will still be in your outbox. If for any reason at that stage you wanted to follow up something while you were in Outlook, then you could do that as well. TaxCalc will keep a copy of that email. So we store a copy of the content that was sent, but we're not storing the physical email itself. That's there through the mail client, so that you can then manage that in a slightly different way if you did want to. Maybe you'd move that email into another folder or forward it on to somebody or something like that. Great.
And I noticed in those template emails that you used that some of the information was automatically populated, like the client's name. I know in my practice, obviously I was a TaxCalc customer, but we didn't have communications centre back then, and I had a separate document management piece of software that I would use for generating all my kind of templated documents, and it could populate things like clients' names and addresses, but it's a completely separate product from my TaxCalc suite, so I couldn't bring in any information automatically that existed, say, within the tax return. I couldn't pull in clients' UTRs, NI numbers, tax payments due, anything like that. All those would have to be hard typed on top of my template letter, where I'd just have highlighted yellow, insert the tax figure here, and then trust that whoever's doing that inserting is picking up the right figure and putting it into the letter or email. Communication Centre is within the TaxCalc suite. Is that something that the Communication Centre can help with?
Definitely, yep. So again, we'll jump back into TaxCalc, and I'll show you a couple of examples with that now. And again, kind of touching on the research and discovery that we did at the beginning, this was an important part of what people were looking for. We already had it in the system with mail merge. So mail merge has been in TaxCalc for a long time. That's there, like I say, as part of your standard package, that all TaxCalc users have access to mail merge. But we're using the same functionality in terms of data fields that pull that data out of your tax return or of your client record. And we're now able to populate that on an email, as well as obviously in the letters that are generated through mail merge. So we'll just show you a quick example here for payment on account for July. Again, just timing-wise, is quite an apt thing to talk about coming up to the end of July. We'll select Use Template. I'll just make that a little bit bigger. So we can see here, as Dee mentioned, we've got our name, so our name can be populated. There's a couple of choices of data fields. You can pick up your main contact if this is a limited company that you're going to email. Obviously, in this case, it's for payment on account for self-assessment, but we do have some flexibility there. We have a data field for your active tax year, the amount of the payment on account that's due, and your UTR. You could add other tax information in there, either on this template or other templates if you did want to. But what we're going to do is just show you, so if I select Choose Mailing List, and I just have set up a mailing list for my payment on account clients, so those that are due a payment on account for July 22. Again, for demo, I've only got 2 clients. I imagine that you would have a few more than 2. But just going to choose those clients just to give you a quick pop to preview and a quick view here that you can see that the data fields have been pre-populated. So we've got Jonathan, picked up the 5th of April 22. This will be generated from the tax year you've got selected here. We've got the amount that is due for payment on account, which obviously is important, and their UTR. So the scenario that you mentioned where if I had 30, 40 clients that I was due to send this to, okay, I might be able to reuse an email, but I'd at least have to type in the payment on account, the UTR, on 30 separate emails. That adds risk, transposition error, or just basically getting the information wrong. So we know this is coming directly from the tax return and it's coming directly from the client record. So as long as obviously that information is up to date, which you'd imagine it would be, I can send this email. Again, imagine this is to 20, 30, 40 clients. I choose my template, I can click send, and within a few minutes, that's then been sent, and I haven't had to generate that multiple times.
Great. Yeah, that's really good. And I think as well as kind of auto-populating the correct figure from the tax return, it's also identifying only the clients with a payment on account to make that you're generating this email for. Certainly in my practice, when it came round to doing the January and July payment on account letters, I'd be basically scanning through every client first, then identifying the ones with a payment to make, then generating the kind of templated letters, and then typing in all the figures. So actually only picking out relevant clients is also, I think, a very useful part of that. You mentioned mail merge earlier as well. So obviously Communications Centre, what we've shown us so far has all been email generation. I'm thinking particularly letters where I had an accompanying document that needed a wet signature. Although I much preferred to keep everything digital and use email, we still certainly sent out lots of letters. Can you also use all this functionality for generating letters rather than emails?
You can, yep. So again, we'll just show you a quick example here. So I suppose touching on the electronic part of your comment you've mentioned there, we won't cover it in the demo today, but we have eSign Centre. So if it was a larger document that you did need signature, it wasn't necessarily needing to be a wet signature, but just at least a signature on. TaxCalc eSign Centre is perfect for those types of situations, so maybe an engagement letter. However, if it was a physical letter that you did want to send and maybe you wanted to mail merge that separately, then we have the ability to do that positioned within Communications Centre. So this changed when Communications Centre was released towards the end of last year. We just moved mail merge just from the main client record just to be positioned in here. However, as I touched on before, this is available for all TaxCalc users. The generation of mailing lists, similarly, is available for all TaxCalc users, and the use of data fields and data mine is available for all TaxCalc users. So the ability to generate these emails is there for you on your standard package. So we would just jump into mail merge templates. We have a list of default templates. The majority of those are engagement letters that have been generated based on CCAP guidance. These have been in the system for a while now, but you can create whatever templates you might want to pop into the system. So if we just scroll down, for example, we've got our payment on account template. So if you didn't want to send that via an email for any reason, you could send that via letter. But as I said, the majority of these are things like an engagement letter, your terms of business, and documents that generally are slightly more long-winded and that you may need to customise a little bit more. So yes, we definitely can generate those. And like I say, they're part of the standard TaxCalc practice suite.
Great. Now, I did say we'd pick up the questions at the end, but I've just seen one's come in asking how you set up a new template. I think given we're in that screen, could you just quickly kind of show how you would create a new template?
I can. I'll explain rather than go through the whole process. So obviously it takes a while to generate just the actual template itself and bring it back in. But we just go to create template. That will then generate a blank Word document. That Word document can then be tailored to whatever you want it to be. Once that's been saved, we would then go and we would select import. Selecting import will then bring that template back into MailMerge. So it's just a case of getting that MailMerge document, the template created, and then you can import that back in.
Great. So if you already have template documents that you're using, you could actually use those
You could
as a basis.
Export. Yep, so you could export. We've got the option there for export. So you could take a letter or a MailMerge template, export, make some changes, and then import that back in again.
Great.
Yep.
So another problem I had in practice was making my communications targeted. So again, I used another bit of software because I couldn't really do that in my document management software that I was using. So I purchased a CRM system so that I could send emails just to certain groups of clients. So either only if I wanted to send some kind of communication just to sole traders or just to limited companies, or perhaps just to clients that were VAT registered, rather than use a scattergun approach of send the communication to absolutely everybody and see what sticks. So I had to buy another bit of software to do that, and just thinking in mind with MTD for ITSA coming into force in the near future, I'd be wanting to send targeted communications just to clients that are going to be affected by MTD for ITSA, which I just know would be a pain in my CRM system because I'm going to have to somehow put the right information into that CRM to identify clients that are or aren't going to be affected because it doesn't communicate with my tax software at all. Is that a problem that Communication Centre can help with?
We definitely can, yep. Again, I think with the power of the data that you have within TaxCalc, something like your thresholds for MTD being your level of income, that information is already in the system. So we're kind of just going to revisit some of the bits that we've touched on previously with mailing lists and data mine, but this is where the power of that comes in so that we can make sure that we have the right targeted list of those people that we need to contact. So again, we'll jump just into a Communication Centre, and we've got we've come down into Communication Centre into mailing lists, and we have a mailing list here for our MTD clients that have an income over, or business income over £10,000. So again, we're just going to edit just to give you a view of how that data mine's set up. So again, just for belt and braces, I've just added in a condition to limit that to individuals, just to make sure that it is giving me the right results. And then I've got my condition here for my total gross business income for 2021, so for last year, is greater than £10,000. Obviously, if the threshold changes, if things change, we can then set that condition to what we need it to be. So we run that. We've got a handful of clients here that have fallen under that condition, so do have an income of over £10,000. And again, similar to the examples we gave with payment on account and the other examples previously, we can select use mailing list, and we can choose a template. So if we have an MTD for ITSA newsletter or update or something that we want to send, we can have a template for that. We choose who we want to send it from, go to preview message, and again, just for completeness, just show you that the names are pre-populated. And again, within a few seconds, we can send that email out, and that's then updated all of our MTD clients on the current status. Again, that mailing list is dynamic. So if all of a sudden a client comes over the threshold, that would then be added into the list if we next needed to communicate with them.
Great. Just trying to think how I used the CRM tool that I had in practice, and I predominantly used it as a sales tool, trying to identify clients that I could be selling additional services to. So I remember one use of it in my practice would be identifying, or basically saying, give me a list of all my clients that use Xero as the bookkeeping application, but don't use us for bookkeeping services, because then that gives me an opportunity to promote either some training or maybe try and upsell them to use bookkeeping. Could Communication Centre be used in that way as a kind of sales promotion tool?
Again, yeah, it definitely can. So as long as the data is within TaxCalc, we can data mine on that and we can then produce a mailing list. So again, I have an example that I can show you here. So we have a mailing list for clients who use Xero, but who perform their own bookkeeping. Again, as before, we just pop into our data mine just for you to get a feel of how these things are set up. So we have a condition here to show us our bookkeeping software setting. This is located on your client record. Your client record allows you to set which bookkeeping provider your clients use. So in this case, show me everybody who's set as Xero. And then I have another condition which is based on the services that we're providing. And that service here for bookkeeping is suggesting that this service isn't offered. So we have a choice here of service offered and service not offered. So these are all of my Xero clients who I don't offer bookkeeping services for, in theory, who are doing their own bookkeeping. So I've got, again, a handful of clients here. And again, I could then use that mailing list and I could have a template that is set up to, as you mentioned, either suggest they may need training or to provide an additional service to them. So that template makes sure that everybody within the practice is communicating the same type of information to their clients. So if there is any feedback, if there's any comeback from that email, then everybody knows what's been said.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just going to think about all these different ways that I could use data mining to get subsets of clients to communicate with. Because one thing I found in my practice is I'd go through phases of doing newsletters because I wanted to disseminate useful information to my clients, but I just hated newsletters. I tended to find that all the information was not going to be appropriate for all of my clients, and I knew it wasn't going to be. I only wanted to send relevant information to the clients it's going to affect, but I didn't have an easy way of being able to do that. So I think this would be a useful solution for that. Now, something else that used to infuriate me a little bit as my practice grew and I took on more members of my team was perhaps the inconsistency in the style of communication with clients. So I kind of assumed, wrongly, that my team somehow by osmosis would just learn how to communicate professionally with clients by looking at previous letters or emails that I'd sent and kind of copy that tone of voice, keep all the formatting consistent, use the same font even. I quickly realised, having reviewed emails and letters that gone out to clients, that actually that isn't something that happens automatically, and the way some of my team were communicating with my clients were kind of how they talk to their friends down the pub, and that wasn't really the kind of professional way of communicating that I wanted consistently across all my clients in every communication. Would Communications Centre be able to help in terms of consistency of communication?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few angles there to cover. I think the first, in terms of consistency of content, is really covered by quite a lot of the examples that we've been through up to now, primarily with using templates. So again, we'll just drop into TaxCalc just to give context to this. So with our email templates, I think I touched on before, you can have as many of these as you want to. You can categorize them. That makes it a bit easier for people to find and pick the right template for the right purpose. But I think when we spoke to, again, a lot of users when we were trying to do our discovery on the comm centre and scenarios that you've mentioned came up, it was more not so much a case of them wanting to communicate, so like yourself wanting everybody to communicate in your way. It was more just to have a standardised way, whatever that way happened to be. So what Communications Centre allow a practice to do is talk to each other, find out what the best way of communicating with a client is. We know that some clients are more difficult than others. Some need a little bit more pressure than others. So you could have different types of templates potentially for different types of clients. That could be something you could data mine on within the system using a custom field and the types of clients that they are. So there's a lot of flexibility there with how you use these templates, but most importantly is having the right templates with the right content, so there's standardization. So whenever somebody knows that they need to send a communication, they're using the appropriate template that everybody else is using, and that would then stop you having to go hunting through years or months worth of emails to find an email. I know that I sent that 2.5 years ago, but I can't for the life of me find it. the template will allow you to do that within a few seconds. So from a consistency perspective, it's really important. It was definitely something that as a team we got feedback on, and we wanted to make sure that people had the facility to be able to manage. Mailing lists obviously help with targeting that we touched on, so I won't cover that too much at this stage. But the other side of it is consistency and kind of brand positioning and having a professional approach to your practice, because the content is one thing, but how those emails are perceived and received is another. So as part of Comm Centre, we have a few areas that will help people with their branding and with making sure that it's as professional as they want it to be. The first of those is within Admin Centre, so I won't jump into there just now, but in Admin Centre there is a setting when you go into Customise Communication Centre for you to set your default font. So as a practice, if you did want to use Arial, so I've got Calibri here, but if you want to use Arial or Times New Roman or another font type, so I just select actually our drop down here. So we have a whole list of font types that you'd imagine in a normal editing tool. So that can be set globally in Admin Centre. So when I then come back into Comm Centre, that's set by default. So it makes sure that everyone's using our standard font if there is one that you want to use in your practice. Probably as I've been going through the demonstration, people have noticed the icons that we've got on the toolbar here. So some of these are kind of obvious that you'd imagine you would have in an editor, so bold, italic, underline. We have font colour and highlighting, if you did want to add a little bit of personality into your emails. Alignment and bullet pointing and things, again, that you'd imagine as standard. But more importantly, we touched on a little bit earlier in terms of having links and potentially having attachments. We spoke about using mail merge. You can actually attach a document to an email. So we could pop into our attachment link here and we could choose a document and we can add that onto our email. We could also have some text and we could pop in a link, and that link could then, so again, the text could be whatever we wanted this to be. So if we did want to change that around, then we could have the word website and we could then have an embedded link that would then, if we selected to open link, would then take you to that URL. So we have the option for embedded links. We have the option to insert an image within the document. So we could pop our image in here. But more importantly, we can select to insert a signature. And the signature, which again, you might have seen on a couple of the templates that we had earlier. So just pop a couple of details in so that I can preview this. You can see that our signature has then come through. So this is a mailbox signature, and this is a signature that's been set on the mailbox within Admin Centre where the mailboxes are set up. And that by default will then automatically come through onto our email, and that will allow us again through templates to get consistency and have our branding and imaging on our emails as well. So if I just clear that there. Okay.
Great. Okay, so effectively you can brand your emails so they look like your existing emails that you send through Outlook, just to maintain that kind of brand consistency. Given that it kind of has the look and feel of Outlook or any email client that you happen to be using, well, why not just use Outlook? Why would you want to use Communication Centre?
Yeah, which is a good question. And I think kind of the demonstration and the problems that we've kind of highlighted today and the features that Comm Centre includes is kind of where the answer to that sits, really. That Outlook is amazing. Obviously, all Office tools are what they are. What TaxCalc Communication Centre allows you to do is bring that within TaxCalc to utilise the data and the power of the data that you have already within your system, which you wouldn't get directly from producing an email in Outlook. So principally, the information that you're sending from TaxCalc Communication Centre is then logged and stored against the client record. So that allows anybody in your practice, if you're off on holiday, to check that client record and they'll be able to see that a communication was sent out, whether that be a request for records or, as you say, an MTD update, those types of things. It also allows you to make sure you have some form of standardisation in use of templates. You're not having to go hunting through older emails, but more importantly, the use of the data. So we're pre-populating data within TaxCalc from your tax returns and from your client record that you just wouldn't get if you were generating those emails through Outlook.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Right. As promised, we did want to leave some time for questions, so we'll get onto those very shortly. Just before we do so, I'm going to run a second poll. So it's just a straightforward question about whether you'd be interested into speaking to one of our team about Communications Centre. Obviously, there's only so much that we can demonstrate in a webinar, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. But if you have any particular questions, more to your own personal circumstances that you'd rather speak to one of our team about, then please just go to the current poll there and answer yes, I'd like to speak to someone on the team, and then we'll get in touch. If you don't want us to contact you at all, then feel free to either not answer the poll or put no in the answer box there. Okay, so Martin, let's turn to some of the questions and see what we've got here. So some of these questions obviously been asked as we've been going throughout the webinar, so some of them may well have been answered already in Martin's demonstration there, but we'll try and cover off as many as we can. The first one there is, can we get a recording of this session? That's a nice easy one. I can answer that one, Martin. Yes, you can. So after any of the TaxCalc TV webinars that we do, John, our very expert engineer in the studio, does a nice tidied up version of the video, and we'll get that out to you within 2 or 3 days. But as I mentioned before, if you perhaps if you've gone to see a great movie, you want to just go back and watch it again so you can pick up all the good stuff that you missed the first time round. If you want to do that, as soon as this webinar ends, go off, make yourself a cup of tea. If you come back into the webinar from the link you first arrived at, then within the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, you should see the recording playback for you, so you can watch it back on demand pretty swiftly. Such is the technology that we use in the office here. Another question we've got here is about attachments. Martin, we're being asked whether you can, for example, attach last year's tax return summary, or maybe a copy of a tax return to an email. Is that something we can do in Communications Centre?
You can. Yeah. Do you want me to show you briefly? Yeah. So I think I think I touched on it just towards the end. So I don't know when that question came in, but one question we get asked quite regularly is with regards to the automated messages. So we touched on right at the beginning of the demonstration that our automated messages are generated into our pending queue. What we can't do at the moment is set up an attachment to be attached to those messages when they're generated. However, again, a benefit of them popping into the pending queue is you can then make the decision of what you want to do with them at that stage. So I have one left here that I've got in my pending queue. If I did want to add something to that or change that before I actually sent that out, which this gives you the opportunity to do, I can select edit, and I can then add in my attachment, so add attachment, and I can put my attachment, and then I can send. So yes, an attachment can be added to any email. The only thing here is when your automated emails are generated, you will come into your pending queue and add those attachments to the individual emails before you send them.
Great. I've got another question here. Can automated messages be attached to tasks within jobs?
So no. So simple answer, no, not at the moment. What we have in terms of integration between Comm Centre and Practice Manager Plus, so with jobs, is your request for records emails that are generated through automation. There is an automation setting that you can add into your jobs and tasks so that when that email is sent, that can update the status of your task. So in most cases, your first task within a job will be to request records. So once I've sent that email, that can then complete that first task and move you on from your workflow. So it's kind of that way round rather than actually generating the email from the tasks themselves.
Great. We've had a couple of questions about the ability to add signatures and images within emails, which I think you ably demonstrated that you can add those in. On a similar theme, I don't know whether this is the same question or a slightly different one, asking about whether we can personalise the emails. There's a suggestion there isn't space for logos. I'm presuming we're talking about templates here then rather than
yeah, I'm not sure I quite get the question, but in theory, yes, there should be enough space to add whatever you want to into the system. I suppose if that's a specific scenario, maybe something to speak to our support team about if there's a slight limitation there. But images can be added into the content of the email. You also have the option, if it's not, say, branding or anything like that, and you just want to add the image in, you can add that as an attachment rather than an embedded image as well. So, but yeah, there shouldn't be kind of a limitation on placing on the email. We do have a size limit for images, so we'd hope our size limit covers the majority of standard images, but that may be what they're touching on there, that it might be the size of the file that you're actually trying to add into the image. So yeah, maybe speak to our support team and might be able to help you with that.
Okay. And I guess depending when people have seen Communication Centre before, certain functionality we've got now is not necessarily available when we first released the product, as we continue to
for definite, and that's a good point actually. Our summer release was released over the last few weeks, so do check your version. If you're not up to date and you've got a notification in the top right hand corner, make sure that obviously you go through that process and update, because yes, for Comm Centre, the ability to add signatures, including images, embedded links, and some of the formatting options was released in our summer release over the last few weeks. So if you're not up to date and you don't see some of the things that we've been through today, then that may be a reason why. So yeah, it's a good point.
Great. But a question about the repeated requests. So the example that you demonstrated was an annual request based on the accounting year end. Could you also do something similar with, for example, quarterly VAT return requests?
So was this for the automation or the follow-up after?
I suspect the automation.
I suppose the answer to that probably is both. So yes, we have the settings in automation. I think if you remember when I showed those before, so we have accounts and we have VAT. For VAT, that will pick up dependent on your client setting. So if you have a client with quarterly VAT or monthly VAT, then that particular request will be set up appropriately based on the setting on your client. So the automation, yes, can be set to be generated so that you don't have to remember those request for records emails. The subsequent example that we showed with a task, yes, you could easily set that up, have your own activity type in the same way that I did with accounts. You could have that for VAT, and you could have that running more regularly if you wanted to, or less regularly. But the same principle would apply. You would be setting up a filter in order to find, so a mailing list in order to find your clients that have that work status set, and then following the same process.
Great. We've had a question, how many email templates can you have? Is there any limitation?
So in theory, there's no limitation. Obviously, if somebody added hundreds and hundreds of thousands, there may be a point where the list becomes unmanageable. But in theory, no, there isn't a limitation. Obviously, you would want to categorise them to help yourself out. But yeah, there shouldn't be a limitation.
Okay, and again, I think this one probably maybe demonstrated after the question was asked, but if you have automated emails generated which you later decide you don't wish to send, can you remove these from the message pending section?
You can, yeah. I'll show you that just very, very quickly because I just happened to be on that screen. So we were in the pending queue before, so we simply would just select cancel on the right-hand side. So we spoke about the option to send and bulk send, edit that I touched on if you wanted to add an attachment, but we'd simply select cancel. I could do it for this one here and confirm, and that will then drop off. Cancelled messages go along with your sent messages within your sent and cancelled screen just next to the pending queue. So yeah, they can be easily cancelled if you don't want to send them.
Okay, great. Now we're almost up against time, so I've got one more question that we'll answer for you, probably quite pertinent one, Martin. How much does Communication Centre cost?
Okay, so Communication Centre per user is £45 a year. So for those of you who happen to be on our kind of monthly payment plan, that works out roughly, it works out £3.75 a month. So not very expensive at all, but yeah, £45 per user per year. That comes with a number of constraints or situations within the system that you need to manage. So £45 per user per year allows you access for that one user. If there are a number of users in the practice who need to at least look at the communications that are going on within the system, we spoke about the communications being stored against the client record, then a user needs to have a license in order to use Communication Centre and access that information on the client record. So it's £45 per user per year, but that gives you access then to all of the different areas that Communication Centre allows.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Right, we're right up against time, but before you go, I just wanted to make you aware of a new publication that is hot off the press, and you are the first people to learn about this guide that we've created, all about communicating value and giving clients what they really want from their accountant. So if you want a copy of that guide, please just go to the web address on your screens, taxcalc.com/communicating value. I'll also pop that link in the chat so you can just click on it. It's a really great guide written by me, so please go ahead and download that and hopefully you'll find that enjoyable. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Martin for giving us an excellent demonstration of Communication Centre. If you've got any questions about the product, then please do give your account manager a call or give our support lines a call. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next edition of TaxCalc TV, where we'll be turning our attention back to MTD, and that will be coming up towards the end of August. So if you're going away between now and then, do have a fabulous holiday, and we'll see you on your return.